Senator Payman, welcome to the weekend briefing. And a lot of people know bits and pieces about you because you have been in the headlines for several weeks. But I'm interested in getting to know, I guess, the human behind the headlines. Talk me through your journey from Afghanistan to Pakistan and then growing up in Australia.
Thank you so much for having me here, Antoinette. Yeah, it's been quite the whirlwind in the last few months, but nonetheless, my story sort of begins back in Afghanistan when we fled the Taliban and moved to Pakistan as refugees. And that's when Dad decided in 1999 to flee Pakistan and come here on a boat uh, as a refugee and start life from scratch and make sure that he was able to give us the opportunities in life that we otherwise wouldn't have been afforded if we were still in Afghanistan. And obviously, we're seeing that in the headlines in the past few days about just the injustices towards women in particular that's unfolding in Afghanistan. But yeah, it's been quite the journey coming into a multicultural society. Modern day Australia looks a lot different to what it did 30, 40 years ago. And trying to adjust to the new way of life here was a challenge, but it's not just unique to me. I feel like many people from various diaspora communities find it difficult adjusting to the Australian way of life, which is ever evolving because, there are a plethora, a melting pot of cultures that makes us who we are as Australians.
And you did touch on the Taliban, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on what it's like witnessing from afar the regression in freedoms for women in Afghanistan.
It's absolutely heartbreaking to see the basic human rights stripped away of women, of young girls, the basic human rights to an education, to participate in the workforce. The Taliban make it seem like it's a version of Islam, but that's not what it is. The Quran stipulates in chapter 96 that all mankind need to educate themselves. The first word that was revealed to Prophet Muhammad was read. And it wasn't just read or educate men, but that goes to beyond just men. It goes to women and children. So to see what the Taliban are doing to women and girls, in particular in Afghanistan, is just heartbreaking, and it needs to be called out. It needs to be condemned because that level of regression in the 21st century is just mind-boggling.
Politics runs in the family. It's in your genes, in your blood. Talk me through where you draw your inspiration from. And as I understand, it's also in part why your family fled to Pakistan.
Yes, so my grandfather was involved in politics, and Dad was starting his own party at some point, and this was just before the Taliban had, returned to power, and that led to us fleeing Afghanistan and going into Pakistan. Dad was a big believer that one day he would take me back to Afghanistan and get me to run as a politician, and he would run my campaign. And the reason why he thought that was not possible here in Australia was because we never saw anyone that looked like me, someone with a hijab in politics and in parliament. So that was a very far-fetched idea. And I guess upon my election, all I'd wished for was if Dad was still around to just, for me to see the expression on his face that, it's doable, and I've probably achieved something that he would never have dreamt of. But yeah, it's definitely something that I've grown up speaking about around the dinner table. Dad would, talk about world politics day in, day out. How to end things like poverty and build orphanages to help a lot of the widows and children, not just in Afghanistan, but worldwide. So those were definitely aspirations and things that Dad would always reflect on. And that conversation was always alive at the dinner table.
When you were elected in 2022, it was celebrated widely. It was celebrated by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Here's what he had to say at the time.
And Fatima, that's what government looks like. And you know what? It looks like Australia. Diverse, strong, men and women, people of different backgrounds.
How do you feel listening to that now, given what's transpired since that very passionate and appeared to be genuine statement to the media?
I feel like the Labor Party were not ready to have me in complete, as a complete package, really. It was great to have me look different. It was great to have a diversity of candidates, but diversity of thought and ideas and expression was probably something that the Labor Party were not ready for. And that definitely has transpired in the last few months, where we've seen an absolute silencing of voices of dissent within the caucus, within the ranks of the Labor Party. And I'm starting to hear from people on the ground who say that the Labor Party have forgotten what the true Labor Party stands for. And these reflections make me realise that there's still a long way to go for the Labor Party. It's great to celebrate that diversity, but that diversity comes with different voices and different views and ideas. And it's disappointing, really. It shouldn't have ended this way, for me at least, and for the Labor Party. But just to see that rules that were made 130 years ago is a lot more important to the Labor Party than reflecting the realities and the communities on the ground, that we try to embrace the multiculturalism, but it appears to be just confetti that we love to sprinkle around and photo ops that we love to take, because it gives an image that we want the world to see Australia as, but not fully embrace it.
So that rule that was broken that you mentioned was enforced or came into effect 130 years ago, is about crossing the floor, and that Labor expects its government, its caucus, to vote in line with the party. So you weren't born the last time a Labor Party member crossed the floor. Is it time for that to be changed? Or, some have suggested that there are rules, you broke them, you weren't a team player, and that those rules are in place for a reason.
I do have respect for rules, but that being said, when something is within your own platform, that rank and file members, the party, the unionists, people have come together to put what's in the platform as almost a mandate for the government to follow, I don't see that I crossed the line. I mean, yes, I broke the rule of crossing the floor and voting against the government's position, but it was the government who went against their own position that was in the platform. And this was in particular around the recognition of the state of Palestine. And that had been in the 2021 platform, the 2023 platform. So for the Labor Party to turn its own back on its people, on its rank and file members, the unionists, its volunteers, I really see it as the Labor Party wasn't fulfilling and upholding its own values and principles. If the platform is such a meaningless document, then why do we spend so much time, energy, every 2 years coming together and refreshing the platform if it means nothing?
So when you went on Insiders 2 days later, did you pretty much know that you were putting the final nail in the coffin of your Labor political career by saying that you would cross the floor again? Were you acutely aware that you were parting ways with the party?
Well, even on Insiders on the Sunday, so I had crossed the floor, just for the record, on the Tuesday, and then on the Sunday I was on the Insiders, and I was asked the question whether, was it a fleeting moment where you felt under pressure, or would you do it again? If the same question in its same form was presented to the Senate, and I said I would cross again, I do not intend on leaving the party because I don't see how that contradicts what our party stands for. Crossing the floor as a rule may contradict what the rules of the party is, but the substance and the content of why I'm crossing the floor again is based on what the platform mandates the party to do, the caucus to follow. Now, some in the caucus may choose the caucus over their communities, but for me, it was important to stick by my conscience and do as rank and file members that stand for the true Labor Party actually wanted to see.
Were you prepared for the fallout?
No, I don't think anyone would ever be prepared in a situation like that, because I was not getting communications directly from the caucus. I, like everyone else, was waiting to hear media reports because the day after crossing the floor, I woke up to Richard Marles on TV saying that I would not be expelled. So that was news to me. But it was great to know that I wasn't being expelled. But what did it mean to be suspended from caucus? And then further after appearing on Insiders, I was told that I'll be indefinitely suspended, which again, I did not know what that meant. So being put in a position where you're given an ultimatum to decide on either towing the line and going against your principles and conscience, or staying true to your conscience and, either sticking it out as an independent senator, or leaving politics completely. And I felt that I still had so much to contribute within the political space. I had so many supporters, people from across, around the nation, across various states, saying, hang in there, we need you in there to keep fighting the good fight. So it was a very tough conversation and decision for me to make. I had conversations with my husband, my family. I knew what the implications would be if I chose to leave the party. And obviously the media fallout and the backgrounding that ensued after I resigned was frankly just disturbing, really something that I wasn't expecting from my former colleagues.
I want to get to chatting about your husband, because you are a newlywed and he's a former Labor staffer. But you talked about the media fallout, and I want to talk about some of that framing. In one piece, you were described, or some of your donations were described, that you made some donations to quote, a Barbie-hating Islamic TV studio. There were other articles questioning whether you'd renounced your citizenship to Afghanistan, whether you were eligible to hold the position in government that you do. There was a whole lot of fixation about your reference to saying something that was absolutely in God's hands. And I know something in Arabic that is said, inshallah. It's said multiple times a day by very religious people as well as by atheist people. It's something very ingrained in Middle Eastern and Islamic cultures. And even a piece by Patricia Karvelis, the ABC presenter, who wanted to dissect how much you would be guided by God. But it's this question that stumped you and caused a lot of people to sort of raise their eyebrows about how you're positioned and whose interests you're positioned or suggested to be representing.
Can you elaborate, Senator, on what the suggestion that you're being guided by God in your decision making, and will you campaign on sort of other Islamic Muslim type of issues?
I don't know how to respond to that question without feeling offended or insulted, that just because I'm a visibly Muslim woman that I would only care about Muslim issues.
How hard is it to now forge a career as an independent senator against the backdrop of media framing and commentary like that?
I wouldn't say it's difficult. It's just about taking control of the narrative. I'm more than just a Muslim senator. I represent the entire state of Western Australia as their independent voice, from WA for WA. And to be pigeonholed just because of the way I look, speaks to the bigotry, the framing and the the stereotyping. I'd say the stereotyping that the media tried to portray me as just this one-trick pony, somebody who only cares about Muslim issues, is far from the reality of what it's like to be a senator for a massive state representing people from all walks of life. And I think you don't see that. If I was a middle-aged white man, nobody would be like, are you forming a Catholic party? Are you forming, do you only care about issues that pertain to the Christian population? But the fact that I may have used the word inshallah or in confidence told my colleagues who were going around backgrounding big time, and I could tell that, they were particularly agitated that how could somebody actually have principles and stick to their principles and not follow the rules. It was almost like they couldn't fathom that there could be an individual that could just follow their conscience and principles. And for me, obviously, that decision was greater than just my own self-interest or the interests of the party.
So you're being backgrounded by former colleagues. You're being stereotyped, pigeonholed, misrepresented by sections of the media. You're considering what your political future is or could be, or whether it's over. At any point, do you think, gosh, I hate the face of democracy and the media in Australia? God, it's shit.
I think I always knew media was just, it could be toxic, it could be harsh and frankly, not true. So I think I didn't let that get under my skin because I knew what I was standing up for was right. And I believed and had full conviction in what I was fighting for was correct. So everything else that was happening around me, the backgrounding, questioning my eligibility as a senator for Western Australia based on Section 44, like these were all distractions. And it indicated that if this is the precedence that the government, the Labor Party, is trying to set by saying, as long as you do what we want you to do, you can fall under the umbrella of the Labor Party and take part in our democracy. But the moment you step out of line, that's when it's a problem. And that's when we're going to use every force against you. We're going to try to paint you as this alien, as someone who doesn't belong to our society. So I don't know what message they're trying to put out there to everyday Australians when it comes to social cohesion.
I just want to challenge you on one thing. If a Labor colleague had also stepped out of line and crossed the floor and was, say, a middle-aged white man, do you believe the response would have been the same? Because arguably the rule was broken and that person could also be forced to leave the Labor Party.
Yeah, and that's totally cool. Like when I crossed the floor, I understood that this could cost me my membership of the Labor Party. So I did it willingly and knowingly that this could lead to my expulsion from the party, and I was at peace with that decision. But the fact that the party just strung this along, they indefinitely suspended me and they really cornered me to that decision of give your position back to the Labor Party or toe the line. Frankly speaking, like those two options were not the only options. The third option was leave the party and continue serving as an independent senator, which is ultimately what I decided to do. Now, a white man would probably have been expelled and that's it, like end of story.
Without the backgrounding and the insinuations of the hit pieces.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what would have happened. This person would have been expelled and that's it, end of story. Yes, maybe there may have been backgrounding, but the fact that they couldn't find anything but a few donations that I made or the fact that Section 44 was in question, it was the party literally shooting themselves in the leg because it just made them look very petty.
So the party not only lost you, it also lost your husband, who is a Labor staffer. Now, you married earlier this year, so it's been an enormous year of highs and lows for you. What's it been like for your family?
It's been pretty full on. We've had very intense discussions. I don't think any newlywed couple would envision having such life-changing discussions so early on in their marriage. But I'm very grateful to have my husband by my side. And for him to make that active decision to leave his role and resign because it was just becoming untenable for him to be able to support me while also carrying his duties as a senior staffer to a Labor minister here in WA. So it has been pretty full on. I remember my little cousins earlier sort of in the year being bullied at school because they had the same surname, and obviously there was a lot of frustration in the community that I wasn't doing enough, and my little cousins being bullied as a result of that just really compounded the impacts that this whole experience and that whole experience of being stuck between a rock and a hard place, where I was trying to have backdoor conversations and convincing the ministers and my colleagues to do more, while also being ostracized by the community and made to feel that, I just didn't belong, and by extension, my family were being targeted. So it's been a rough past 10 months, to say the least.
What's it been like as newlyweds to read headlines that suggest that your husband was collateral damage as a result of your defection?
It hasn't been easy. It has really taken a toll, but we know that what we've done is for the right reasons, and we've made the decisions together every step of the way. I would say that I'm the more of the risk taker in the relationship, and he's risk averse, but nonetheless, we've spoken through every decision that I've made and made sure that, we've been content and at peace with the path we've taken.
We've spoken a lot about Labor Party rules, your relationship, media framing. What we haven't spent a lot of time talking about is the heart of this, and that is the ongoing war on Gaza and Labor's delay in recognising Palestine as a state, despite its well-publicised intention to do so, and despite supporting a two-state solution. And you've made a very good point time and time again. How can you support a two-state solution if you don't recognise one of the states? What is it that's prohibiting, in your opinion, the Labor Party from taking a bolder and more humanitarian stance on Gaza, given we've all seen the footage, we've heard the speeches that Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has made throughout his career before coming into power?
I think what the current Labor Party lacks is the visionary icons like Gough Whitlam, Bob Hawke, Paul Keating, who were definitely on the side of humanity, who had the courage to speak the truth, even if it was unfavourable or even if it wasn't the most popular view at the time. And I think the Labor Party has really lost track of what it truly stands for. And I don't know where it's headed. I've been speaking to many Labor Party members or former members who are absolutely disenfranchised with what once was a strong Labor Party, who was clear in its positioning of what's a genocide, of what is human rights violations, and even mandated the recognition of the state of Palestine, to then just not have the courage to deliver and implement it. I really don't know who is doing all the, advising behind the scenes, but it's clearly not what needs to be done.
Could it be simply this, that irrespective of whether we have a coalition government or a Labor government, that our relationship with the United States is the priority, hence why the government has to support the United States, which funds, financially supports politically and provides moral cover for everything that the IDF and Israel is doing?
I think Australia can, within the middle power nations, it can be a leader. It can exercise its own right to have its own national foreign policy. And yes, the alliance is important, but that doesn't mean the US jumps off a cliff and we just follow suit, right? Like, we are clearly seeing that the social cohesion the peace within our own shores is being impacted, we can't just keep looking at the US and following their direction when we know that our stability and security within our streets is a lot more important than how the US tries to conduct itself. I mean, New Zealand, for example, is exercising restraint as best as it can, but at the same time also calling out the genocide, or at least not to the extent that we are silencing members from our own ranks from calling this a genocide, or from even pausing trade with Israel. For example, when Zoe Frankham, the aid worker, was killed, she was our own Australian citizen, and yet it just felt that there was not the action that we wanted to see. It was just very passive. And again, it requires a lot of courage to be able to stand our ground as a country on our own. I mean, you know, we've got a vision for an independent and a republic, Australia as a republic, as its own head of state. And we can't do that if we're so tied to the US that we can't even have our own national foreign policy.
There's an election coming up in May, and the Muslim community, or parts of the Muslim community, are mobilising under the banner of the Muslim vote. Do you expect Labor to be punished at the polls as a result of its stance on Gaza?
Whether it's the Muslim vote or just everyday Australians, I think they're going to hold the government to account, and not just on its conduct around Gaza, but everything else from housing to the cost of living pressures. And I think it's going to be an interesting election, seeing what's happening in the NT, for example, last weekend's election. And I'm keen to see what Queensland delivers, but I think the frustration in the community isn't just exclusively within the Muslim community, albeit I know that there is mobilization within those seats that have Muslim majority. I think people are starting to wake up to the reality of our political system, and they're not taking their votes and their representatives for granted. So I see for the first time people really educating themselves about our political system, and people are straying away from the two-party system that we've, it's been always let's vote for the lesser of two evils.
Yes.
Has been what the sentiment I've been hearing on the ground, and now it's really shifting to, all right, we're going to look at the voting records, we're going to look at the stance and the policy position of this representative, whether they be from the Labor Party, the Liberals, the Greens, whoever it is. How do they best represent our voice as a community, as an electorate? And people are coming together. So it's quite refreshing to see our democracy, take this new, fresh lens of the way it's looking at the landscape. It's going to be an interesting election.
You've been asked a lot of questions, some outright offensive, some leading. What's the one question that you've been asked again and again that you really loathe or don't like answering?
Will you form a Muslim-only party?
Well, I'm not gonna get you to answer that. Thank you for sharing it. What would you rather be asked?
What kind of an independent senator will you be? What are the policies you stand for? As a young Muslim as a young person of color, person of faith, who lives in Western Australia. I mean, we're quite a parochial state. We always feel like we're left behind and nobody really pays attention to us. So, what are you going to do for WA?
What are you going to do for WA? What are you going to do for WA?
Great question, Antoinette. Thank you for asking. I would love to be WA's megaphone in Canberra, from Indigenous affairs and First Nations people's issues to looking at education and access to better healthcare in our rural and regional areas, looking at making sure that, regardless of your postcode, you've got the best access to, whether it's public education, whether it's private education, and ensuring that, you don't have to toss between whether you want to go see a GP or put food on the table, or parents having to skip meals because they want their children to be able to have a meal or two. So there's just so many issues. I mean, I did my 12 towns in 12 days around WA. It's a massive state. Like, I did over 7,000 kilometers, and 50 hours of traveling. And it was only a snapshot, and it was just scratching the surface. So I know that there's so much more that I can deliver and, continue advocating for WA. And obviously, we haven't had an independent voice for the last 34 years in WA. So it's been a while. And I know that when you don't have any political affiliations or strings attached, people are more open to expressing what the local issues are. And if you listen hard enough, you would understand that there are local solutions to those local problems. It's just a matter of listening, and ensuring that those voices are elevated and brought to the policy-making tables where it matters. So I think, independent for the win.
It sounds like you're super passionate about the next chapter of your political career as an independent. Is there somewhere in the back of your mind that's left the door open, even so slightly ajar, at potentially rejoining the Labor Party if, as you say, it finds a way to return to its roots?
Look, I feel like it may take a while for the Labor Party to become the true Labor Party that a lot of voters and a lot of rank and file members are hoping. For example, the pre-2018 Labor Party that was brave enough to talk about negative gearing and, ensuring that capital gains tax isn't an issue that, only benefits the top 10% of earners in our country, where, the millionaires and billionaires are getting all these tax breaks. But I think it will be a while. I don't see myself joining the Labor Party anytime soon, or returning. I'll definitely not be joining the Greens. But I don't know. There's many options out there. I'll just, stay tuned.
Watch this space. Stay tuned.
Watch this space.
Thanks so much, Senator Payman. It's been fascinating having a chat with you.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been brilliant.
That is it for this episode of The Weekend Briefing. It's a place where we have the opportunity to get to know the interesting and influential people behind the headlines. We want to hear from you. Make sure you leave a comment below, like and subscribe. Catch you next week.